I'm going to introduce you now to Patrick Woods. Patrick Woods is the Deputy Vice Chancellor Resources at the University of Technology. We are incredibly privileged to have him here with us this afternoon. He's very busy. It took me months and months of negotiation with one of his 6 flock of executive assistants to get him here. So thank you very much, Patrick, for joining us. And we need to also thank Patrick, because it's with Patrick's support, funding support, that we're able to do the studio, we're able to build the models, we're able to have lunch, we're able to do all these things in this winter studio. So Patrick, thank you so much for your support. It's a completely fascinating project to be involved in, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about the Masterplan. Thank you.
No problem, thank you. Can everybody hear me at the back if I don't use too many microphones here? Is that okay?
Okay.
I've been told I can talk underwater and I have a very loud voice, so it tends to work for me. Yeah, Tarsha's been very kind in her introduction. My role at the university is largely one of builder, banker, and commerce. But that is also a privileged role in the sense that I get to be involved in things like this and indeed other activities around the city, given the university and what it does. In looking at what you've been doing today, one of the things I realize is that it's been a very long day, and most of you must be very tired sitting there and almost burned out for the day. So I'm going to try and keep this as light as I can and not be too intense. My objective today is really just to give you a flavor for what the master plan for the university is, but not necessarily specifics around that master plan as opposed to what has to be done to try and manage a plan of this scale, size, and with a number of stakeholders that are involved. Some master plans that you look at are in a position where, I'll call it, they're lucky, i.e. it's greenfields, there aren't too many stakeholders. And this one, it's anything but greenfields, and there are more stakeholders than you can shake a stick at. And the master plan itself has required a considerable amount of consultation, and it's part of the fun of my job, really, just being involved with that many different people. So what I'll do is I'll whip through this. I'm not sure how it's controlled. Do you do these slides?
Yeah, you just give
so
me
I
some
just
kind
go
of sign.
Like this and it
yeah.
happens.
Sometimes you have to go like this. Like
wake up, it's been a long day. All right, I'm going to sit here, or I might get up, we'll see how we go. So I'll just go through the plan itself, and as I go through, just talk about some of the nuances of each one of the elements of the plan. So if you can just hit one there. What we tried to do in the first instance, but 4 years ago, almost 5, when I joined the university, one of the things the university said was, we have to buy more land. And I said, why? And they said, we have to grow. And I said, why? And they said, because University City's got 55,000 students. And I said, so? And it came down to really changing the attitude and culture of a university. It's easier to stand because I can wave my arms about and say, you know, what is it that we want to be as a university? And the answer is not big. We're very, very specific in what we want to do. And the analogy that we started to use back then was that we wanted to take what was a really good drivable car, call it a Holden, and say that's a good thing, but we actually want to be in a position where we're driving a Mercedes. And all that goes with that, all the quality, all the nuances, and take the university and turn it into that. That meant that what we do inside the university, which has got really, really good teaching and learning, we were ranked in the top 3 in the country at any one point in time, and really good research in specific areas, although not being research intensive, and reflect that in the environment that we find ourselves in. And that's certainly not the case, or it wasn't the case previously. We had some consultants come in and they looked around the university, and these are planning consultants, and said one of the most fascinating aspects that they found in coming in was that it was like opening up an ant's nest. You looked on the outside, you'd never guess what was in the inside, yet when you were actually in there, you saw all the activity, you saw the spaces, you saw the teaching, you saw the research. We wanted to open up the university, take the cover off the ant's nest, and make sure that the rest of the world could not only see, but participate in that. The first part that's up there says what I said just now, so reflecting the high level of teaching and research. We wanted to provide more infrastructure for research. What I said was we're not research intensive. We're not a University of Sydney. We're not a University of Melbourne, where some of the research is gee, why is the sky blue? We can't afford to do that kind of research. That's not us. What we do is practical research. Will that bridge stand up or not? Will that design actually work or not? But we need to do more of that, so we need to reflect that in the campus structure. We wanted to create a sticky campus. For those of you who have ever spent time on the campus, it's not, or it hasn't been until recently, a campus that you wanted to stay at. You come, you do your lecture, you head off to Chinatown or into Newtown or wherever you want to go to actually enjoy yourselves, but you don't really enjoy yourself on campus. So we want to create a sticky campus where you stay. We wanted to connect the two campuses, so you've got the Haymarket campus and the Broadway campus, and much of your discussion today will have revolved around one of the elements of connection, which is the UPN, and I'll talk about that later. We wanted to create a campus with more connectivity to industry. One of the things that we do as a university is actually have a lot to do with industry. But where are you going to do that? Where are you going to physically do that on campus? So we had to create a lot of spaces around campus to actually create that integration seamlessly. We wanted to connect to the local community. One of the things that was discussed in the early days, well, should we gate the university? Should there be just a big sandstone, 2 pillars, a big gate on it? The answer is no. We want as much thoroughfare through the university as possible. As I said, open up that ant's nest. And last but certainly not least, in particular in the context of today, we wanted to connect to Darling Harbour, but we also want to connect to the east and the west, to Chinatown, into Ultimo, down into the Fraser site, etc. So, what are we talking about as far as the campus goes? Well, when you look at this, you can see 3 different colors there. And as you can see in the legend, the red is under construction, green's completed, and the brown is in design. So what's completed? Well, what we've got completed at the moment is the student housing. We're sitting under that student housing at the moment, 720 beds. One of the things the university was facing was a difficulty. We have 440 beds for 35,000 students. That is the worst student bed ratio in the country. So we knew that wasn't doing us any favors. We had to actually change that. Now we've added 720 beds. We're still probably 1,500 beds short, but we don't want to have those a kilometer away from the university or 2 kilometers away from the university. Somehow, we've almost got the answers, we need it on campus. And we've also finished a number of things in a couple of other buildings. One of the fun construction zones was in the multi-purpose sports hall. We don't have space. Where are you going to put a gym? Well, the only place you can't put it is underground. So we dug a big pit. We made it look good, and it was completely fitted out, and we covered it over. And I'll show you some pictures of that shortly. What else have we got? I won't spend much time on that. Suffice to say that we have a number of things under construction, one of which is a big pit in here, 42,000 square meters for the Broadway building. That's the new housing for the Faculty of Engineering and IT. I'll show you some pictures of that shortly as well. We've got the Dr. Chow building, the Gary Design building up in Haymarket, and we've got the additional wing coming into the science faculty here. All up, what are we talking about? 240 million, about 130 million, about 150, 60 million. So, a little bit of money involved. Whole program, about 1.1 billion. Now, there are a number of areas that we haven't started yet. That's in brown. For example, the entire surrounds to the tower get changed. One of the things that we do want to do is shift the library from where it is up here in the Haymarket campus down into what will be called a learning commons, not a library. One of the aspects that we're trying to change with this entire plan is the way we do teaching and learning. The space that you're sitting in now is a reflection of that. We're in a situation where the way learning takes place, the way teaching takes place to aid that learning is changing. The last thing we want to do is stand and deliver. Students don't like it, you don't get the results that you're looking for from a learning perspective either. So it's moving much more to a group learning environment. Most of the learning environments within that campus change. There may be some examples I can't remember in this of how that's happening. So I'll get Tarsha to keep moving and I'll stop boring you. Okay, where are we? I actually just talked about that, so I'm not going to talk any more about that. Keep going. Yeah, as we said, that's okay. I'll just actually hit the next one. So what have we done? Multipurpose sports hall. Look again. What does it look like underground? It's an interesting design in the sense that it is naturally ventilated. It's got natural lighting to a large extent. The lighting that is there, however, faces up, so it's reflected off the roof, and you don't end up with glare all over the floors for basketball and taekwondo and everything else that takes place in there. The other thing we finished with student housing, as I said, that's actually been an interesting exercise when you think about how student housing is constructed. About half of it is studio apartments, about half of it is shared accommodation. So we look at that and think, does it work, does it not work? Well, when we built it, we were told by all those that were involved in student housing that the first thing to go would be the studios. Everybody wants their own room with their own bathroom, and they're willing to pay for it. And what's actually happened is that what sells out fastest are the shared accommodations. So 4 rooms with 1 kitchen and a shared bathroom, 6 rooms, same thing. The last thing to sell are the studios. So it's been an interesting exercise in economics as we've gone through that one. People want to share, so we'll move that, we'll reflect that. Just some ideas of what that looks like. This is just the common areas within the building. We've got a common area on the roof, probably the best outlook of any student housing I know of. This is just an example of a larger bedroom for those that are disabled, and some of the living areas. I'll keep going. All right, the other areas that we're having to deal with are older buildings. This is what we call Building 10. So when we look at all of this as a campus, yes, there are a lot of new buildings, but there's a lot of work that has to be done to refurb older buildings. This is one example that we're having to work on. It's the old Fairfax building. Keep going. So inside the building, we've redone it all for the nursing community. There's, and this is interesting when you build a university. I used to run corporates all my life, and I could take a corporate and I can say, right, we're going to move it from this building on Pitt Street to this building on York Street, and by the way, we're going to need 22,000 square meters. Thank you very much. It's basically replicating floor by floor. In a university, it's like building a village. Well, we actually build a hospital. It has everything that a hospital will have. You actually build labs for research, and all that's detailed in that. You build offices. You build everything that a village would have. So it's a very diverse environment that requires a lot of different planning, and that has been one of the challenges with that master plan. Just more examples. Okay, the other thing we're looking at is the Great Hall upgrade. We'll keep going on that one. Some of you may have had the opportunity of looking at this. What we had as a Great Hall was anything but a Great Hall. We recognize that. It is now state-of-the-art as far as the technology that exists within it and the versatility that it creates for us to be able to do multiple different types of presentations and activities within the hall. Okay? Just an example of the fashion parade that was in there. View from the outside. Okay, what are we doing? Building 6 podium extension. That's what we're in now. Keep going. Okay, just some examples, and this is really what we're focused on as a university. We need spaces where students can actually gather, talk, interact, and not sit in classrooms. This area here is part of that, and there are other examples, some of which are depicted here. Okay, under construction, under design, Broadway, Chow, Thomas, and Library Retrieval System. Okay, the Broadway building that I talked about before, just a view of what it looks like. Just across the street on, that's okay, do the next one. So this is the big pit that it was. Just across the street is the big Fraser's exercise when you're coming in from the west of the city. The city has now determined or indicated to us that this is viewed as the new entrance from the west with this building and the Fraser site. Okay. Yeah, we're starting to lay concrete. You've all seen this kind of stuff before, I apologize. Okay, the Gary building, or the Dr. Chowchak Wing building, pretty much looks like that as far as the final design goes. There have been some minor changes to it, but you won't really notice them. Yes, it's glass on one side, and yes, it's bricks on the other. But again, here for us, it's an interesting building design. The architect has been an amazing person and an amazing team to work with in the sense that when we started all our other buildings, we went through architectural designs. And with the Broadway building, it was DCM. With the front of the building, it was the Cost Stevenson. With the what do you call it, science building, BVN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of them have come back and said, ta-da, there's your design. We've gone, oh yeah, that looks really good. I'm sure it'll work. And inevitably, it takes a lot of work to get it to work. This has been the opposite. When Frank came in and his team came in, it was a case of him saying, yep, I'm going to build your building. We said, what's it going to look like? And he goes, I don't know. And we said, that doesn't quite cut it for us. What's the budget? I don't know. So it was an interesting meeting of the minds with respect to how it was going to work. The first thing that happened is we said, here's your budget. And he goes, no, you don't understand. We don't start with budgets. And we said, as a university, we have to start with a budget. And we went from that to say, what's the building going to look like? And he says, okay, well, we'll start with a budget, and then what we're going to do is we're going to talk to the faculty and understand what their needs are. And we still had no idea what the building was going to look like. And at this stage, we had committed to $20 million in design. And we said, okay, let's sit down and work with the faculty, which we did, and he did. And the building was literally designed from the inside out. We had no idea what it would look like. But what we did know was what each floor plate would look like, what it would be used for, how the faculty would integrate itself into the building. And then all of a sudden, there was a skin put on the building. And it was at that stage that we started to really start to nuance the skin. And initially, it didn't look like that. That took about 6 months to develop from what initially looked like a bunch of milk crates stacked together, literally. It's what you're seeing there. So that exercise of working with that type of architect from an inside out, literally inside out, to finding it looked like that was very different from everything else we've looked at on the rest of the campus. Yes, Tarsha.
Can we pause just there for a second?
Yeah.
This is really interesting. It's not very, well, we only occasionally get the experience of someone procuring architecture from architects as opposed to architects speaking about the process of working for clients. Can you speak a little bit more about the process that you were working with the other architects, BVN, Lacoste, Stevenson, etc., and why it was different to the way that the Gehry building was procured? Because I think that from the conversations I've had with you, that was quite key, wasn't it?
It was. Well, let me just talk about the other architects, and indeed, we've continued with that because Frank's the only one that we've been able to find that has had that different approach. The procurement process for all the other architects was a case of, here's a brief. This is what we're trying to do. It needs this much space. It has these capabilities. And we then run a competition. And we then usually cull it back from what can be up to 15 designs that are reasonable back to somewhere in the neighborhood of 5. We then pay a little bit of money to get those designs refined. And those designs come to the tender evaluation panel. But inevitably, all of those designs tend to focus on, can it meet the brief? And does it look reasonable? And the difficulty with that is that the brief at that stage in its life cycle really doesn't reflect the nuanced, refined, well thought out needs of a faculty. For example, a science building. Where are you going to put your super labs? Basement, top floor, bottom floor? Where are you going to put electron microscopes? It's not refined when you go into a brief with an architect. And what we need in an interaction with an architectural environment as a client is for the architectural firm that we deal with to really understand that the design that we end up choosing may not be the final design. They have to be flexible enough to sit back with us and say, okay, it kind of looks like this, and we know it kind of works, but we know we've got a lot of work to do to make it really work for you and look the way you want it to look, as opposed to what we have seen in the past, preciousness. This is our design. Thank you. Isn't it great? Yep, there it is. And is it going to change? No way, because this is our design. That's just not on. It doesn't work, and we're seeing it everywhere. That precious approach does not produce a product that works for the client. And I have to say, working with what some people call a starchitect, and we expect it to be an egotistical experience, was anything but. It was completely the opposite. It was almost as if when you sit down with somebody who's got nothing to prove because of the fact they've done it, their name is out there, they're more willing to be flexible, they're more willing to work with the client than those that have something to prove.
But the trust came from your side as well, right? Because if you committed to a $20 million fee agreement with them already, like that's a huge risk for you guys to take based on their reputation that they could deliver, and also a process of an intellectual engagement around the problem, which to me seems to be the richest moment.
Yes.
And I wonder whether we, there's a culture in Sydney where we don't trust our local architects enough to make an agreement of that substantial nature, and then to embark on an intellectual project that which ends in form, ends in form rather than begins in form.
I agree. I'm not suggesting, and I saw a hand go up over here. I'll be there in a sec. Several.
I think she's yawning, actually.
That's all right. Yeah, everybody stay away. The trust element is an important aspect, and you're quite right. And I'm not suggesting that this experience that UTS has had with Frank and his team is necessarily an easily replicatable experience. But I am suggesting that more flexibility can be built into the exercise so that the process has an expectation of morphing rather than an expectation of it's cast in stone.
Sorry, the thing that occurs to me in this, now that I'm actually on the client side, in particular roles, is the way a brief is written. And it sounds to me a lot like Geary kind of challenged not just the way the brief was written, but the way existing processes work for the institution, for the industry, for the whole scenario. And it's kind of opened up possibility. I think it's kind of a key, an opportunity now to rethink the way other buildings might be procured, other processes might be employed, and I think it could be as literally as simple as rewriting the way briefs are kind of framed. Aspiration comes to the fore. I'm talking a little bit about the South Australian experience here. The aspiration comes to the beginning of the document rather than the end. And the articulation that this needs to be a process that unfolds, that meets our needs. And I think any good architect could respond to that sort of requirement. If it's articulated. I think what's happening is that there's a default position around these ways of doing things and ways of thinking and ways of responding to briefs that's been lost a bit.
Do you think the competition process is helpful?
In our experience, South Australia doesn't do competitions anymore. They're completely reluctant because of that preciousness, the idea that you do a competition to choose an actual building or a project and the way it looks, and then there's a preciousness around what that is, which, and I can understand that reluctance being on the other side now and being involved in risk management. What we're trying to devise are processes that choose a design team to then work through the creation of a project, so that you're actually getting what you're after, which is good design services, not necessarily the final image of something at the beginning of the project.
Is it possible to design by committee like that, do you think?
I don't think that's necessarily designing by committee. I think that's being inclusive in the way you think about design. That's what I'm going to talk about.
I think your statement with respect to if we change the way we engage, basically, the way the brief is written, the expectation of the architectural community when they engage, how that process works is a critical one. Sorry. Yes?
I just want to ask something very simple.
Yeah.
What's the budget on this project?
160 million.
And am I right in interpreting what you said, that the architect's fee was 20 million?
No. We're dealing with all kinds of planning and design in that fee. And in answer to your question of what Frank's fee is, I can't say what that is, but I can say that it's more than we would have paid to other architects. Right? So there is a premium there. But from an executive's position within the university, that premium has already more than paid for itself.
As I understand it, the budget has then doubled almost.
Goodness, where did you hear that? Total bollocks.
The original estimate was 85.
No. No, we came in with a budget of 150 million. That was what our original budget was. We then said, as part of the campus master plan, part of that 1.1, we then turned around and said, nah, the university actually wants to teach differently, put more IT in there, change a bit of the fixtures and fittings, and moved it to 160. Not at Frank's request, that was at the university's request. So the budget has been very, very closely monitored. It was something that Frank is painfully aware of, as I have to say are the other architects that we work with. It's certainly not a slight on anybody else. Sorry, there's a hand back here somewhere, I'm not sure.
No, I think it just is waving around.
No? There's the gentleman.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think that Ben almost answered and said the question. As idealistic architecture students, we would like to believe that we respond to the client's needs, and the process that you mentioned you went through with Geary is what we would like to ideally believe all our projects are going to be like, when in reality they are the competition that you've been running before. How would you have reacted if a major, say, Australian architect had responded, look, here's our design skills, we know that we can design, and here's a pretty building that builds that space, but what we want to do is the process that Frank Geary took you through. Would you have just thrown that out as you hadn't ever experienced that? Or how would you see that now?
Oh, hindsight's always 20/20. I think that now it's a case of if somebody had come to us with, I'll call it not just a reputation, but a success story under their belt, we probably would have accepted that as a viable process. The engagement of Frank was a serendipitous exercise, not something that was planned or followed through as we want an architect like Frank. It was just something that happened, which I can take people through it at another time. But all of this in the context of the way the building was designed was different from everything else that we're dealing with. The comment you made is an interesting one. As architects, what should the process be, basically? I have a son, he's in IT, and he goes up to, he's a young guy, he's 26, goes up to his clients and he goes, so what do you want? And he doesn't have a Canadian accent, so they actually understand him. But they say, well, this is what I want. And so he gives it to them, and they go, well, it's not quite what we want. And what he's learning is the exercise is not just delivery of initial expectation, it's an assistance in determination of what that need actually is. That assistance has actually also now been moving around and happening, I'll say, in our science building. And it's that assistance which has actually caused the science faculty to go back and reassess its strategy. You know, given that the building can do this and our other building can do that, what do we want to do as a science faculty? And that interaction with the architectural community and those catalytic conversations has really, really worked well. But Frank was the first one that we've had dealings with that allowed that to take place.
Yeah, no, this is great. Has your sense of what architecture does for the university shifted as a consequence of working with Gary?
Yeah, it has actually.
In what sort of ways, though? Because it's quite broad, the spectrum, hasn't it?
I'm not an architect.
Yeah.
I'm a business person.
Yeah.
And when people came to me and said, you're going to have to pay X premium for Frank, I went, why the heck would we do that? It's like, okay, show me the business plan. Right. And I'd have to say that, yeah, I'll take that one on its chin. I was wrong.
Right. But tell us about what are the areas that it's changed your sense of architecture?
From what we've seen here, the ability for the architectural element of a university to change both the image and function and interface with the community is massive. Now, it's just been it's been an eye-opener for me as a business person.
So that's in terms of getting the UTS on the front page of the international newspapers as being the site of innovative new design and architecture. And
it's a combination of things. It's a case of in the FEET building, the Broadway building. Okay, we've got spaces that now researchers want to be in.
Right.
There's a data arena that allows heavy-duty data analytics to take place. It's an attractive environment. Staff are excited about it. It has created an enormous buzz within the university. All of this has to be done in the context of a financially viable institution. And when they saw that it can actually be done, that we don't have to grow, very much anyway, and it really makes a difference. But yes, in the context of what you said, yes, it gets us on the international press pages.
That's important.
It's been really good. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think you're taking a little bit of a risk. Oh, hang on. First question.
Yes.
Does Gary get any say in what you do and what happens for the UPN? Does he get to review that design?
Yes.
Don't you think you're taking a bit of a risk only spending $7 million on the UPN, given the investment in this building? It's a bit like...
Who said that's all we're spending?
Well, that's the initial budget on stage 2. If they
That's
get
Schiffer's budget.
on the prestige plan.
That's Schiffer's budget.
Okay. And
That's their portion of the budget.
Right. So...
All right, so the
and
university...
What pays for what?
That's the question, isn't it? That's up for debate. Schiffer's got a budget of $7-ish million for the north side of the UPN.
Yeah.
The university has a separate budget for what it wants to spend on connecting its campuses, and indeed what are called things like Project B. You see this car park down in here. That used to belong to TAFE. We just bought it. There's a convenience store here. We just bought it. So this entire space from that building through to what's known as Building U is now university land. What do we do with that? This surround, the connection to the UPN, the bridge, potential bridge across Darling Drive, the design of the bridge across Ultimo Road, all of that isn't all coming out of Schiffer's budget. Unfortunately, we're the big boys on the block, both from a vision as well as a pocketbook perspective.
And can I just point out, some of us are women too. There are big boys and there's some women in there as well.
Big people?
Yeah. We've got the big checkbook anyway.
But this is the first speaker you've corrected who used male terms.
That's because Tarsha knows she can pick on me. I don't care.
I just felt sorry for the others.
She doesn't feel sorry for me. Gee, thanks. Anyway, all of that was a complete sidetracking. I apologize. Hopefully that was interesting. I don't know.
No, it's very, very interesting. Thank you. Really.
Just one question from a more international perspective. Do you have benchmarks in how UTS would be in comparison to other campuses around the world?
In what sense?
In terms of growth and, of course, strategic vision, but it seems like the cultural economy, the creative industry is playing a bigger part. I'm just wondering from your sort of strategic vision, because you have the Fraser's property and then you have all these industrial arts areas. So besides just the campus development, what else are you...
When you talk about international universities, and indeed when you talk about universities in Australia, first thing you have to do is separate between CBD universities and non-CBD universities. You can take a look at Macquarie University. They were given hectares and hectares of land by the state government, and now they're using that to land bank, and they're putting in various different industry partners around them. We've got what we've got. That's it. And other universities like us are in a similar position. So what we can do with what we've got is our first consideration. And when you look at MIT, or MIT is a CBD university as well, Harvard, they've got very different income streams to allow them to do what they want to do. So they tend to go around buying up buildings around them using those income streams. Australia is one of the most poorly funded higher educational sectors in the world. So when you look at the private institutions in the U.S., they're bringing in, the last time I looked, something like $88,000 a year per student. And then when you look at some of the, I'll call it public institutions around the world, they're bringing in somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 per student. We're bringing in 12. So that is including everything the government spends on us. Now we have to redo that study because it's a few years old, and that's 3 or 4 years old now. But when we think about what we can spend, and we're talking about benchmarking ourselves against other universities around the world, we haven't got anything to spend. We can barely teach. So it's an interesting exercise to try and deal with. Sorry, that's now going to keep going. Go!
Right, sorry.
All right. This is actually what the Gehry building looks like now. Ta-da! This has been an interesting exercise because that's okay. Keep going. Because of the fact that it's a highly contaminated site. It's got diesel on it. It's got sewage flowing through it. And it's also had some interesting architectural finds. So it's both a time-consuming and expensive exercise to excavate. Keep going. Okay, now that was the Gehry side of things. The tower, everybody's saying, oh, big ugly tower. Others say we're in love with the tower. I'm kind of shifting to the love side for myself at the moment. When I first came here, I thought we should just clad the whole thing in solar panels and have the biggest battery in the southern hemisphere. That's actually a really good idea at the moment, the way electricity's going. But what we're doing with it is we're leaving the outside. That is not what we want to spend money on. We want to spend money on creating the environment that I talked about before. That's the inside. So we're doing a tower upgrade, a core upgrade, and trying to make sure you can actually get up and down and feel safe in those lifts, which isn't the case at the moment. Keep going. Keep going to blah, blah, blah. This is just an example of one of the floors on the tower. And for those of you who have never been on the tower before, that's getting really close to corporate, as opposed to what we've had in the past, which is all the offices around the edge, so nobody gets any natural light, even though the windows are fairly small anyway. At least there's some light coming in. And it's largely open plan, all the meeting rooms in the middle, much more standard from a design perspective than what the academic world was used to in the past, in our past at least. That's the science building I talked about, and when you look at the science precinct, it ranges all the way around the corner here. This building was built about 5 years ago, just that piece there, for about $106 million. The budget for this, as well as the library stacker, which is going underneath that grass there, is about $130 million-ish. Keep going. That's what the building will look like. Don't take any heed of what Alumni Green is looking like here. There's been a competition run on that one. That was won by Aspect Studios. I don't think I've got that on this presentation, but it gives you an idea of the ferocity that we're looking for at ground level, both for public and for the students and staff. And just a nice shot. The stacker, yeah, again, people, just go back one. People may have seen stackers before. If you've ever been to a warehouse, there's this thing called pick-pack ship. So basically, this is a glorified pick-pack ship. You've got your books in various different bins. The library stacker knows where they are. You order the book, it goes and gets a bin, brings it back. In that bin are a whole bunch of books. Librarian picks out the book that you're looking for and gives it to you. The vast majority, as in 70 to 80% of our collection, will be underground in a hermetically sealed almost environment. Keep going. Okay, don't worry, keep going. Ah yes, the front of the tower. That's okay. The front of the tower is a design that was won by LaCoste Stevenson. What we were looking for was something that would completely offset what this is looking like, but equally so had to be functional. This is going to be the face of the university as well as being functional inside. We're not looking for something that's got a whole bunch of offices in it. It's got to have galleries in it. It's got to have bookstores in it. It's got to have open spaces for learning, as well as, of all things, a 600 seats, what is sometimes called lecture theater, but is more a presentation hall, located somewhere up in there. Keep going. This is Coringa campus. And what we're looking at here is just an example of how we're changing environments. Yes, you've still got the rootless concrete environment, like it. You just need to surround it with a few things that the students are now looking for. And you can see the colors coming in, the workspaces coming in that didn't exist there before. Yes, we all know Frank. Now, if you ever get a chance, I would highly recommend you go down to the Haymarket campus. And there's a space now down there called Green Space, even though this is looking blue, which is an environment that used to be very, very, very dark and dingy. And nobody wanted to go to, so we gave it to the union. Union didn't want it, so we took it back and created the space that you see here. It is by far the most heavily populated space on the university, 24/7. And when the security guard went down the other day, one of the things that happened was they said, "Hi, how are you? How's it going?" And You know, and are you enjoying the space? And the answer was yes. I wish our university had something like this. So this is used by the public. So when you create environments like the ones we're creating, one of the things we have to deal with as a university is who gets to use it. That space cost us probably $8 million. Did we do it for the public? Did we do it for the university? Are we a public institution? It's a big discussion to have because we do want people coming in, but does everybody get to use everything? Because we get really overcrowded. Keep going. Okay, that's it.
That's it, we're done.
Okay, now, before I finish off, I just wanted to say that when you look at what we had there, if you can just go back a few slides, Tarsha, just actually right to the beginning.
Right.
I'm just gonna, yeah, just where they had that colorful slide with all the timing on it. I think that one.
That one, yeah.
Okay, when you look at that, you get an idea of the density of the buildings in the area, and if you really think about it, the complexity of the stakeholders that are involved. You've got everything from the Fraser's community across here to the TAFE environment, to ABC, to Powerhouse, to South Darling Harbour, to Chinatown, to you name it. Now, Tarsha's getting involved in most of these things now in the context of everything that she's doing, and indeed many of the things that you're doing. But that's the world that I have to spend most of my time in, not the design of the buildings. It's actually those stakeholders and trying to understand what it is that we as a university should be doing, could be doing, and what is going to work for the rest of the community. When we said we wanted a porous university, we meant it. Everybody should be able to walk across at ground level, above ground level, underground level, doesn't matter. And work in with the rest of the community. We're sitting here and saying we do want to categorically connect to Darling Harbour. It's got to happen. So I sit down with Infrastructure in New South Wales, I'll sit down with the Powerhouse Museum and everybody around here. And the fun part for me has been the fact that the catalyst for the continuation of the UPN discussion were students. 5 years ago, I asked Desley, the Dean of Architecture and Building, to run a competition for what the students would do with the UPN. And what they did is they just took the southern end of the UPN down here, which I've heard was called something else this morning. There was a mouth and a something. And they said, what we do with it is we put a train down there and we put a carriage down there. And they actually came up with these little artist impressions. It was that idea that allowed me to go to the city and say, this is a really good idea. We really should be doing something with it. And to shift up and create a vision and an excitement. A picture speaks 1,000 words. So what I'm hoping comes out of all of this is the recreation of an even bigger vision so that we can take it and do something with it. Because what we're lacking to a large extent is vision. If we can come up with something that makes sense, it can be done. But my experience so far in the last 5 years, at least 6 years, is that everything we've come up with can be done. So I'm looking forward to actually doing something with what comes out of this. All right, I'll shut up.
So before you do, can you speak a little bit about what, I'd like to have a better sense of what you think productively could happen with that vision. The UPM was clear, there was this dead sort of non-activated space in the middle, right in the middle of the campus.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we, where do you want to go? Where are our students taking you?
The students are taking us to anything but a dead space. Anything but a transitionary space. So if you look at what Aspect Studios and Schiffer came up with initially as a, I'll call it budget version of this whole thing, which they may or may not have shown. And it's basically take what you've done in the south, put it in the north, and then you've got a big track that runs up to Darling Harbour into what will be a redevelopment of South Darling Harbour. Forget it. Don't waste your money. Don't bother doing anything. It's not going to work. It really has to be something that's enlivened, something that has activity, is something that is managed. There are events there on a regular basis. I don't know, noodle markets through to art exhibitions, through to something that's going to engage the community from the powerhouse, anything, but it's got to be active. But I think it's also going to be a path from north to south and a connection from east to west. But it's going to be phased. Because the north will be done by 2013, the end of 2013. The south won't be done until whenever, which means that whatever happens there between now and 2013 is an opportunity for testing what works, is an opportunity for, you know, some initial thought-provoking activities. I think it would be a mistake to have a launch, because you'd be launching before there's something to launch. And I think it'd be a failure, and that's the last thing we need. So, I don't know. That's probably where I see it going. Now, I will say, however, that it would be a mistake to end it here, because the opportunity that exists in both the Devonshire Tunnel and the dive, I think is phenomenal. That is really exciting as to what can be done with that, whether it's cycleways or whether it's grunge galleries or whether it's bars.
Patrick, what do you mean when you say the dive?
The Darling Dive. That's actually what that tunnel is called.
Oh,
It goes
the rail
underneath.
tunnel. The rail tunnel.
The rail tunnel.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity.
That's a cool place, even
Yeah.
though it looks pretty terrible at the moment.
Yeah. Any questions for Patrick?
Yep.
Tracy.
Understanding that the timescale, this is a number of years and that
Yes.
not all these projects will finish at once. Are there frameworks in place to continually upgrade these places once they've been overhauled in this master plan? For example, this is one of the earlier ones to be finished. And is there frameworks in place for this to be upgraded in, say, 3 or 4 years? Or is that really not important at the moment? Are we focusing on this and we'll work this out when that comes to time?
No, both run in parallel. One of my meetings this afternoon is with, okay, backstep. There are 2 directors that work for me. One is the master plan, and one is the ongoing upgrade, upkeep, whatever. So the university will spend 1.1 on this, and then it will spend probably $30 million a year just in doing what we just described. Every classroom is reviewed. The way we teach changes, therefore the classroom needs to change. What we research in a lab changes, therefore the lab needs upgrading. And that's what I referred to earlier with respect to the financial viability of an organization. We run on what's known as a 10-year long-term finance plan, and everything gets factored into that to address what you've just said. Yes?
I'm trying to think about Grace the Stoic.
Don't.
Sorry. Okay. This has been about engaging the stakeholders. One of the things that have come over, if you've been the first speaker, we'd have been going, hooray, UTS is so committed to the UPN, they're trying to make everything happen. Yet one of the speakers, I can't remember whether it was from the floor or from the podium or from the floor, actually said UTS were the hardest stakeholder of the lot to engage with around the future of the UPN.
Oh, that was Peter Morton, and it wasn't to do with the future of the UPN, it was to do with the engagement with the other institutions, so the ABC and the Powerhouse. Because,
yeah, sorry, that's
and I think there's other people that would agree with that, but it's because of the UTS's structure. There's no, it's everything's siloed. It's very difficult to find a point of contact that's got a breadth of engagement across all of the different faculties.
Thanks for articulating it far better than I would.
It's all right.
But the point that I'm making is that you seem so committed to this that I find it hard that Peter was able to make that comment. And yes, Tasha is saying it's because of the silo thing. How does one break that down, and is there a way forward with that? Because it seems to me that if all the stakeholders can go and interact, you're going to get a far richer experience out of the UPN than if UTS is leading, as you're trying to do, on your own. Or
Oh, we're not. Let me just explain some of the history around the UPN and how, with that, same stakeholders, same involvement, but again, as part of all of that, the stars continue to align. And we got to the stage where there was only one star that just wouldn't get in place, RailCorp. And they
But you know, RailCorp aren't here today. Like even with my.
But having said that,
Yeah.
that was a very, very sticky point, because it was them that owned the bridge that went across the Ultimo Road. We then had to come to grips with, what kind of an upgrade would be necessary to that bridge if we actually wanted the UPN to work. And it was then that the powerhouse said we want to continue to run rail up and down that line. Until Don said, no, I don't. And we said, right, well that helps. Let's pedestrianize it, but not impede any opportunity in the future should you wish to upgrade it to run rail over it. It was Don saying, no, we don't want to run it, that allowed Rail Corp to say, well, if you just want to run pedestrians and cycles over it, we can live with that, and let's shut the line down and actually go ahead with things. So that was the biggest hurdle to overcome. But in all of that, the interaction between the stakeholders became stronger and stronger, and those stars continued to align. Now, I agree that UTS can be a very difficult place to get into. But having said that, there's one easy entrance, and it's very easy, and it's me. And that's not meant to seem egotistical. I apologize if it comes across that way. But, you know, all of this and my passion for it is reflected in what Tarsha's doing and what many other people within the university are doing to engage those stakeholders. I know Peter really well, and I've sat on a number of committees with him, and you know, we were part of the Choice for Aspect Studios for the UPN. But one of the things that I would say, when you're talking about stakeholder engagement, you're looking at all the stakeholders around here, define the role of the stakeholder, right? And one of the things that happens within this environment, a little bit of clash of roles and responsibility definition. What does the Powerhouse Museum do? What does TAFE do? What does the university do? It's a little bit easier, and then how does it interact with the ABC, City A Hotel? You tend to, at times, start to trip, and that's when a really level head and lack of emotion and lack of ego comes in. And it does work.
I think also there's another way of thinking about it might be that, you know, if we think about the stakeholders take the term stakeholder off and think about it as communities of engagement, right? And you know, we all know now, because we don't use community, I know that you now in the master's degree don't use the concept of community in a facile way. You understand now that community is the thing that forms itself around a problem. It doesn't pre-exist a problem, right? You can't talk about community in the abstract. So one of the things that's missing, but that's demonstrated by the story about the bridge, is that the solving of the problem of the bridge and the Chowtech building, it was a problem enough to form community around it. Whereas I think when Peter's talking about communities, he's referring to individual roles within these big institutions, particularly with creatives that he'd like to see getting together doing things. But there's no problem that they're coming up together on. And it might be up to us, it's up to the institutions to find, it's like an infrastructure of problem that brings someone with particular technical skills at the ABC together with someone with particular archival knowledge, together with a faculty or a school that's got particular skill sets here, such that they're working together around solving the problem. Right? And that's the infrastructure that we need to set up to make these big groups work together. And we just keep talking about these kind of stakeholders, you know, and the institutions are so large and their skill sets are so broad that it just doesn't really, you know, it's kind of empty at the moment.
You've described it well, and it's reminiscent of what we try and do at the university to try and manage $1 billion. And that comes back to governance structures. And the way it works at the university is we have various different project control groups. We also have working groups associated with them. But the most important part of all of that is who sits on what. You know, picking the right people so that it actually feeds upon itself and you end up with decisions being made. Because each one of them is a problem that needs to be solved. But it's picking the right people to solve the problem that aren't going to bite each other's heads off. That is the art, not the science.
Can we just ask for the night? I apologise for my ignorance because I'm not that familiar with the campus and the work that's being done. There's a master plan. Does that master plan, or is there some other design concept that looks really at the ground plan and says, let's not worry about what these buildings look like or what's in them above the ground level? Let's just really look at how we want the buildings to function and to integrate with the realm. I mean, university's buildings as well as other significant buildings, like the powerhouse museums in the area. Is there a kind of visionary plan of that kind as part of the master plan?
The answer is kind of a bifurcated answer in the sense that that question is answered by the campus master plan. The way it is answered by the campus master plan is through a separate PCG associated with that, or a working group associated with that. While we have what we call a blocking and stacking done for the university, we are about to go to market for a firm to help us with exactly that. That'll probably go up in 2 weeks' time. We're reaffirming with that exercise what that ground plane looks like. But having said that, we're hoping that this exercise also informs that exercise. And that comes back to the governance structure around all of this. Unless we have the campus master plan PCG, all these ideas have nowhere to go. So,
and there's a separate project we're working on at the moment that does exactly that, just in a small section to do with the southern end of the UPN and the relationship between George Street and the ground level of the UPN and Building 6 and the Wembley building, which is the building that forms the kind of end of the UPN. So yes, I think everyone's starting to notice that it's the section now. The section and the ground plane that's important, and how people are moving between levels, just sort of from Harris Street to this level and level 4 below us, and how we get pedestrians off the really dangerous zones like Harris Street. With the opening of Fraser's, the pedestrian densities on George Street and Broadway are going to become more dangerous than they already are. I think people are noticing that there's,
I'd worry that, there is a risk of doing parts of the ground plane, the sections well, but somehow they don't quite gel with some other bits because...
We are equally worried.
Yeah.
We are equally worried, and that's why we're going to market.
I really believe that a strong plan of that kind, you will carry people with you. People will say, okay, I understand why when I design this new building, I need to do these kinds of things. Yes. The street edge or the ground or whatever, or renovate, or even people who are not part of the university. I think, in my experience, that can really have a profound effect.
We're hoping for the same thing. And if you know somebody good, tell them to apply.